Do you find building sourdough starter from scratch challenging? Then you have come to the right place because I will share a day-to-day guide on how to build sourdough starter from scratch. But before we begin, my name is Arti Jorgensen and I've been baking with sourdough starter for 13 years. I have developed so many recipes using sourdough starter and I teach some of them in my online sourdough baking classes. I also built sourdough starter from scratch several times for experiment, so this guide is the easiest way I could find from my own experience on how to build sourdough starter. The process is simple, but I will give you more details as I show you the steps. And I will divide this guide into several episodes or parts and make sure that you watch all of them to get better understanding of the process. To make sourdough starter, you only need flour and water. For the flour, use good quality one because most of the microbes will come from the flour, not from the air. So it's very important to use good quality flour that will not expire really soon. You can use either bread flour or all-purpose flour. If you live in a tropical area or where it's warm and humid, I suggest you to use bread flour to prevent the starter from becoming too thin very quickly. If you live in the States and wonder what flour to use, this is the one I use, King Arthur bread flour with 12.7 protein content. Next ingredient is clean water. You can use any type of water, including bottled water, tap water, or well water like the one I use. If your water has been treated with chemicals, it's better to let it sit overnight before using it to build sourdough starter. It's because the chemicals might hinder the fermentation process. Although, as a side note, I've had success with tap water that had been treated with chemicals without letting it sit overnight on the counter. But it's better safe than sorry. Next, prepare a non-reactive container for the starter such as glass. If you use reactive containers such as aluminum, the acids in the starter will react with the metal in the container and might create an undesired chemical that will contaminate your starter. We will use scale to weigh all the ingredients to get more consistent result. We also use metric system to get more precise measurements. This will help you a lot once you start baking sourdough bread. On this first day, I will just mix 25 grams water with 25 grams bread flour. We do not need much of them because once we start doing feeding or adding more water and flour, we will multiply the amount of the starter very quickly. If we start with a big amount, you will end up with so much starter. Simply mix the two ingredients until all the flour is moist or wet, and then we're going to put it inside the fermentation vessel or the container that we prepared earlier. Once the starter is in the fermentation vessel, cover the vessel or the container, but it doesn't have to be airtight. You can just let it sit on top of the container just to prevent the starter from drying out. I like to smooth out the surface of the starter so that the growth is more even. At this point, the mixture smells like raw flour because nothing is happening yet, but tomorrow or on the second day, usually it will start to smell stinky. Let the mixture sit at room temperature between 28 to 30 degrees Celsius or 82 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. To mark the growth of the starter, I put 3 markings on the container. The bottom line shows the initial height of the starter. After about 12 hours, my starter hasn't risen yet and I can only see some bubbles on the surface. So I will let it sit for another 12 hours. After about 24 hours after I mixed the mixture, my starter has now doubled in volume. However, this rise was caused by the activities of the spoilage bacteria, and this also makes the starter to smell really bad. The bad smell will be fine, except my starter also develops some pink spots on its surface. It means this starter has been contaminated by undesired or unwanted microbes. If your starter looks like this, with pink spots on the surface, it means you have to start over. Throw away the starter and start over the process from the beginning. If you have to throw away starter, throw it away in the garbage can or trash can. Do not dump it in the sink because it might clog up your plumbing system. Since my starter has pink spots on the surface, I have to start over again by mixing 1 part water and 1 part flour. I use 25 grams flour and 25 grams water again. Mix it until all the flour is wet and then put it inside the fermentation vessel again. If you want to, you can sterilize the container for the starter because it might be the source of the contamination. But usually I just wash my container really clean and use it. So once again, you only need to start over with the process if you see pink spots on the surface of the starter. If the spots are gray or yellowish, then the starter is still fine. You can continue with the next steps. You don't even need to worry about the bad smell that often resembles very stinky socks or vomit because it's just a byproduct of the spoilage bacteria activities. I put my starter, the new one, in the container and then cover the container. Put markings on the container to mark the growth of the starter. The reason we put this starter in warm temperature at the beginning of the process is to speed up the acidifying process because lactobacillus and wild yeast need acidic environment to thrive. And warm temperature will help or promote the acidification of the starter dough. The starter from my second attempt has doubled in volume after about 24 hours, but bummer for me, it also has pink spots on the surface, so I have to start over once again. Finally, the third time is the charm. My starter rose beautifully without developing any pink spots. So I will move on to the next steps, which I will cover in the next part.